So for instance, why do we have a healthcare crisis now? We have a healthcare crisis in 2009 because in 1994, the International Monetary Fund wrote a report to the Government of Canada that said, and at that point we were in debt. Remember, this was right before Paul Martin's slaying of the deficit.
So yeah, it would be like 600 to 500 billion.
It was, and the IMF's report was, okay, Canada's not, we're not saying you're a basket case, but our view of your financial viability, and that of course translates into how the bond raters in New York take our financial viability. We would think, we think you'd do better if you did the following things. Stop student bursaries and convert them to interest-bearing student loans. Cut the CBC, cut the NFB, cut via rail, reduce the number of hospital beds you've got. Now, all of those things happened. There was never any democratic debate about it. There was never any democratic debate about it. There was never any democratic debate about it. We lost 20% of our hospital beds in Canada in the year and a half after the IMF report to the Government of Canada. But nobody even really knows it happened. The World Health Organization knows it happened because they've actually done reports on Canada as one of the only modern democracies to have deliberately slashed its health care provision in order to slay a deficit. And it's proven, the World Health Organization studies prove that in doing that, we actually made our healthcare situation, not only is the healthcare worse, but the costs of healthcare went up because people couldn't access timely healthcare when they needed it before it became a disaster. So,
but who was in charge? Who actually made those cuts?
Paul Martin. We were told by the IMF that certain things should be slashed. Now, why couldn't a government say to the IMF, go fly a kite? Well, simple reason. Once you have indebtedness to a foreign country or foreign banks, and your credit rating really matters. If you drop from a AAA credit rating to a AA credit rating, as you guys know, your interest rates are going to go up on the debt you have. So you'll be spending more and more and more out of the federal treasury or in the provincial treasury. And that's why Bob Rae, by the way, as Premier of Ontario, didn't keep his campaign promises. Didn't keep them because he got to Ontario and discovered that if he did the things he promised, bond raters in New York, anonymous people, nothing to do with Canadian democracy, would make a decision to drop Ontario's credit rating such that any promises Rae was trying to keep would come from a smaller and smaller amount of an available budget, because more of his budget would have to go to paying interest on the debt. So they have you over a barrel. So once you have a debt, particularly to external sources, now why, if you have a debt to the Bank of Canada, it doesn't matter. If you have a debt that is external, that the rest of the world is looking at, how large is your deficit? How large is your debt? How much trouble are you in? I mean, look at the United States right now. It's the biggest debtor country in the world. China holds most of the paper.
170 million a day on compound interest. It sure is a lot, sir. Would you restore the Bank of Canada?
I trust Mark Carney and what he's doing. I'm going to listen to respect Mark Carney. I trust the Bank of Canada as it is right now.
Mention of the family living standard. If we restore the Bank of Canada,
Mark Carney, working for Goldman Sachs at the time, was advising the Russian government on economic policy. These policies ended in a severe economic collapse, which happened to profit Goldman Sachs tens of millions of dollars, in spite of their involvement in a $1.25 billion bailout of the Russian government. Goldman Sachs appears to have been betting against success. Mark Carney went on from there to head up the Bank of Canada.
Our government has given private companies the authority to break the law, which in turn is bankrupting the people and the government itself. And then when our government decides to so-called fix the mess that they created, they simply make cuts to all the programs that we'd like to spend our tax dollars on, and instead direct it towards an inescapable debt.